Hello and welcome to my podcast, Your Total Glow, your podcast for your body, mind, and soul to support, guide, and empower you to uncover your most glowing, healthiest, and feel good version of you. I am super excited that you are here with me because truly there's nothing that looks and feels better than making you a healthy, delicious priority. In today's interview, I'm speaking with the brilliant Dr.Julie Phem. Julie is a Vietnamese-born, America-raised refugee, Cambridge-trained social scientist. She's also an organizational development leader, an award-winning cross-sector collaborator, and a community organizer, and she's an expert on respect. Yes, she is truly amazing, and she developed a framework called the 7 Forms of Respect. And I don't know about you, but I believe respect is really important so that we can live our best lives. This is a beautiful interview, and Julie shares with us her story and how we can all think differently about respect. She also speaks about leadership, and this interview is rich in wisdom and absolutely for you if you are looking to broaden your entire perspective on what it means to truly embrace the best version of you. Please enjoy. Hello and welcome, Dr. Julie. I am so excited to have you here with me today and can't wait to jump into an amazing conversation with you. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing, Ruth?
I'm very well, and now even better because I know that you have so much knowledge and wisdom, and I can't wait to dive into this. So could you please introduce yourself to my audience? Who is Dr. Julie Phem and what's her mission in life?
So, Ruth, I've got to start from the beginning because where I was born and how I came to the US is a really important part of my identity. I was born in Vietnam. I came to the US as a Vietnamese boat person. That was in 1979. I came as a 2-month-old with my parents. My father had just been sentenced to re-education camp, communist re-education camp for 3 years after the war ended in 1975. And he said, we need to flee. We can't stay here. And so we went by boat to the US, and we landed in Seattle, and that's pretty much where we made our life. So that's where I grew up. My parents then founded the first privately owned Vietnamese language newspaper in the Pacific Northwest. So a strong part of my identity is being the child of hustlers. I think of them as hustlers among hustlers, entrepreneurs, serving all the Vietnamese pho shops and nail salons, the doctors and the lawyers, and so I grew up with that entrepreneurial spirit. And fast forward, I worked at the newspaper, and I then worked in the tech industry for about 9 years. And 2.5 years ago, I started my own company called Curiosity Based.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. I know that there's so much more to your story. You kept it very short for us, but what a powerful journey. And so very grateful to your parents who knew they had to flee and then made or created something really powerful out of what probably didn't feel very good for them. So absolutely amazing. And thank you for sharing your background with us. Okay, so where to start? Because there's so much I want to know. Tell us, you have studied respect quite deeply, and I believe also have written a book about this. Am I correct?
Yes. It's called The 7 Forms of Respect, a guide to transforming your relationship, your communication and relationships at work.
Exactly. And I personally believe that the base of everything, even healthy living, is respect. Respect for self. And then, of course, respect for others, respect for the world we live in. So I would love to hear your perspective on respect. I know this is a really broad question, but I think it's really juicy, and I'm so excited that you come a little bit from a different angle to my usual crowd who are all in the health sector. And you have a different perspective, and I think this is so empowering for us. So please share your perspective on respect with us.
Yeah, so thank you, Ruth. So I think we all know what respect feels like, feeling seen, heard, appreciated, honored. And yet what we disagree about is, what does respect look like? Yeah. What does respect look like? Does it, for example, for some people, giving unsolicited constructive feedback is respectful, and for other people it's rude, right? Yeah. And some people want, I want to be CC'd on all emails, and other people say, don't CC me on emails unless I need to do something. You're filling up my inbox. And so and yet the way we talk about respect is as if we mean the same thing. So Ruth, you and I could say, Ruth, I need you to respect me. And you say, Julie, I am respecting you. And we go back and forth. And actually what it looks like to us is different, but we haven't actually been able to get at that granular level. We're just using this broad word, respect. And so what I wanted to do with the framework is to help people language, to articulate, what does respect mean to you? What does respect mean to me? Because it's going to look different. And even though we talk about it as if it's fixed, as if it's universal, what I've actually discovered in my research and in talking with people is that it is dynamic, it is relative, subjective, and here's the last thing, contradictory. And this can be really hard for people. It's contradictory. And that's because we as humans are contradictory. And I know some people feel like, well, aren't I being a hypocrite if I don't give respect the same way I want to get it? It's like, no, we're just human. And so that's it's this framework that is really, it's to help people articulate how we want to receive respect and to understand that people want different things. And it's a tool to spark curiosity so that we want to learn from one another, that we don't assume that we want the same thing. And then even, I mean, Ruth, when I started doing this research, I would ask people, because I didn't actually have the word respect in mind when I started doing this research. What I noticed is that we just had different expectations for how we want to be treated. And so then I'd ask people, how do you want to be respected? Or how do you want to be treated? And they said, with respect. It's like, well, what does respect mean? And are you familiar with the golden rule, Ruth?
Talk me through it.
Treat people the way you would like to be treated. Yeah. That's the golden rule. Yeah. And so people are like, oh yeah, respect is the golden rule. Now, the thing about that is, what if someone doesn't want to be treated the way you want to be treated? And then there is something called the platinum rule. So treat people the way that they want to be treated. Now, what if they don't tell you? Or what if they don't know? Or what if they're too embarrassed to tell you? Or what if they tell you and you don't like to treat people that way? So I'll give you another example. Let's say, hey, I really like to get acknowledgement. And for some people, giving acknowledgement feels superficial. It's like, you should only give acknowledgement when it's absolutely exceptional, not just for doing your job. Now you're making me compliment you on something that I think is just so basic, So that's the platinum rule, is treat people the way they want to be treated. So actually what I have is I created something that I call the rubber band rule. And so the rubber band rule, and I've got this rubber band here to illustrate. The rubber band rule shows that actually we're flexible as humans. We're able to, Ruth, I know you like to be respected in certain ways. I'm kind of ambivalent. I can do it though. I can stretch for you, right? And think about when we're in groups of people, family, or friends, or like at work, and we're they have certain expectations, or we think they have certain expectations. And so we're stretching and stretching and stretching, and we don't really like it, but we'll do it because we want to be accommodating. And you know what happens over time is we stretch and we stretch and we stretch and we snap. And we snap. So with the rubber band rule, it's about knowing, what are my internal breaking points? What's going to make me snap? Because that's going to be different for everyone. Because some people are like this big loose rubber band here. I'm go with the flow, whatever works. And other people are small, tight rubber band. And they're like, I got my boundaries. No. And it's really, it's about being able to know what is going to make me snap, because that is different for everyone.
So true. And I had so many mini light bulbs going on in my head, flashing like, yes, of course. Just through all the things you have just said, I believe at least 4 mini light bulbs that went on for me. So thank you so much. I couldn't agree more with you. And I feel like in my work, what I do, it's all about individualization, all about making sure that everything is tailored to the client, because we are also very different. We have different needs, we have different backgrounds, different situation, different genetic makeup. And so if I don't tailor to that, I know they won't get the right results. And I feel this is very much what you have been saying as well, with different words. And then what I also love so much is that you brought into the game curiosity, because this is what, for example, yoga is very much based on. So we're trying to not judge, and we all have an inner judge within us, or I believe we all do. But, you know, instead of bringing the inner judge out against us and against others, can we just observe and, you know, be there with curiosity, and maybe just think, oh, okay, this is interesting. Why, for example, is the inner judge coming out? If we can notice, or if we just experience any other feelings, just, oh, this is interesting. And it just takes the monition, if you want to call it that, out of the concept, and keeps it just really open, and yeah, so much more freeing and nicer, I believe, for self and others. So totally love it, and totally love this rubber band concept as well. And I can relate for myself. I could just see myself snapping in moments when I shouldn't have. But again, looking at it with curiosity, okay, there was more to learn, there was more to experience for me. And if we have that awareness, if we can come in with more awareness, we can see, okay, are we in that loose rubber band, or are we tight? And what can we do for ourselves not to snap? Because obviously this then creates more love and more happiness and more peace. So so beautiful and so empowering for us all, I believe. Can we dive a little bit more into that concept of curiosity? So have you got a few tips? How do we do that? And what happens if we do?
Well, so Ruth, it's interesting you brought up yoga, right? And I actually, so when I talk about curiosity, I actually describe it as a practice. And usually when people talk about curiosity, they talk about it as if it's an adjective. I am curious. You are curious. They are not curious, right? Or it's a noun, something we have. I have curiosity, or they don't have curiosity. I actually describe it as a verb. It's sometimes something we sometimes do and sometimes we don't do. And so I actually liken it to meditation. And meditation looks really easy, yet it's very, very hard. And there's no way we can always meditate. We can't be in that meditative state, right, all the time. And the fact is, I can't always practice curiosity. In fact, probably life would be a bit dull if I just was always, always curious and never angry and never upset and never acknowledged all of my negative emotions, right? Because we all have them. And so what I actually, when I talk about this practice of curiosity, it's so there are three situations where curiosity comes up typically. The first one I think is what people usually think about, which is pursuing new knowledge. And pursuing new knowledge, usually to create something, maybe something outside of your comfort zone. All right. So that's the first, like, oh yeah, I'm going to practice curiosity there. Second level is I am not getting my expectations met. Am I going to stick around and practice curiosity to hear what this person has to say? And Ruth, I have walked out in the middle of plays. I have not finished books. I have zoned out in conversations, right? I have not practiced curiosity at times because my expectations weren't getting met. I was disappointed or I was resentful. I was like, why am I wasting my time on this? The third one, and this is the hardest, is when I really fundamentally disagree with someone. I disagree with someone. I think maybe they've wronged me. And am I going to practice curiosity to understand their perspective? This is the hardest one because usually what people do is I'm listening for the points that I can refute, right? I'm listening to respond to whatever you're saying, but I'm not actually listening to learn. And so I pose two questions here to help people understand how difficult this level is. The first question is, before I get into a conversation where I know I disagree with someone, maybe I feel that they've disrespected me and I have to bring this up with them, right? And so the first question is, do I want this person to learn from me? It's like, yeah, I'm going in this conversation. I definitely want them to learn from me. The second question we have to ask ourselves is, am I willing to learn from this person? Am I willing to learn from this person? And we have to truly answer that. Am I, or am I just performing it? Or if I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing to do, but I'm actually not ready. Because sometimes we're just not ready. And that's okay. I think actually what happens nowadays is we're logical. We want to be reasonable, right? No, it's okay. They didn't mean that. And yet if we're still feeling residual anger, and we don't think that that is going to be relieved by talking to them, then we're not ready. And that's okay. Because I think actually sometimes people rush into it and they say, I want to learn, but actually they're listening to persuade the other person. And that other person can tell. That other person can tell. Yeah. Right. And so those are the three situations where practicing curiosity comes up. And then there are what I call the three elements of practicing curiosity. So the first element is self-awareness. The second is relationship building. And the third is clear communication. So let me take you through this. The first one is, how do I be curious about myself? How do I ask myself if I'm feeling disrespected, rather than just being Ruth disrespected me? I say, why do I feel disrespected? So asking questions of myself. The second one is relationship building. So that's, how do I learn about other people? How do I ask them questions? And also, how do I share myself with them? How do I let them also react to me, interpret whatever my stories are? And you know what that means? That's reciprocity. That's back and forth. We need to have reciprocity in a relationship. I can't just go and ask someone all these questions and not share anything about me. So I know a lot about them, but they don't know anything about me. I can't build a relationship that way. And some people, they don't like to talk about themselves. It might be out of humility, like no one wants to know about me, or I don't want to brag, or I don't want to talk about myself. We all kind of have to, if we're going to build a relationship though, it has to be two-way. And so with that first one, I think of it as inward curiosity, practicing inward curiosity. And the second is practicing outward curiosity. And the way most people talk about curiosity is they talk about it as if it's just outward, right? Like I'm going to explore something new. And yet the way that I think about it, the way we think about it is it's actually both, because they feed off each other. And that goes to the third element, which is clear communication. So how do I listen to understand? How do I ask questions when I don't understand? How do I tell stories and specific examples? This really comes up around the respect work, actually. because someone will be, sometimes people say, how do I get my coworker to show up on time? It is so disrespectful. And I'm like, so why does it, maybe I think you need to start with telling them why it matters to you, because it's disrespectful. Well, yes, but talk about why. Because you need to respect people with punctuality. So they kind of just go on this because you should, right? Which is different from this is why it matters to me. I mean, for me, for example, punctuality matters to me because growing up, my mom was always late picking me up from school. She was always late. I knew why. She was working really hard. And yeah, I felt a lot of shame because the school staff had to wait with me. They couldn't go home and leave a child there. So I felt really bad for them. And I also felt anxiety. And I was just, when I grow up, I'm not going to do that. So I actually feel anxiety around time. And I know that's coming from this period in my life, this early period in my life. I can't help myself. I feel anxiety. And someone else could have the exact same experience and have a really different reaction. I'm like, what's the big deal? My mom was always late, not a problem. I'm late too. It was fine. So we can have similar experiences and different reactions, and we can have different experiences and similar reactions. And it comes down to the story is individual to us. And when I share that story with you, you're not going to say, Julie's just rigid about time. You're going to understand where this anxiety comes from.
Absolutely. We then can relate. And I guess we all have similar things within us by which we are triggered, or similar, maybe not completely similar, but we all have hurts within us and trigger points. So this is definitely something we all can relate to. And it takes it just creates a completely different picture from, oh, she is not respecting me because she's always late, she's not respectful of my time, or something like that, to, oh, okay, what's actually happening within her. So asking the right questions can help us actually to understand the other person from a different level, and then we can relate differently. I love that. And there was so much in there. I feel I have to listen to this over and over again to be able to really grasp it all exactly the way you said it. I love how you keep it simple, yet it's so holistic and empowering. It's really, really beautiful. And I feel, again, it comes down to, that we are all very individual, and keeping that in mind, when we bring that curiosity then, and okay, so this is how it feels for me, but it might be a complete different story for the other person. So if we can just keep that in mind, it is so much more loving. It creates such a much more loving concept and then world. It's beautiful. It's really enriching and enlightening, I would say. My kind of enlightening. I have a question. So for me, how can I, as a beautifully imperfect human being who has, I don't know, lots of trauma, lots of wounds, like we all do within us or within me, how can I, who doesn't know this beautiful concept that you have created, how can I make sure, with maybe easy steps, that I don't get triggered by something that really feels harsh to me? Let's say I grew up in a family where there is constant aggressive and passive aggressive behavior. Let's say that's my background situation. So let's say I'm trying to create a healthier, happier relationship with my family, because I believe this is what my soul then has come here to do, or part of what my soul has come here to do, to resolve that in love. Yet I get triggered all the time by that passive aggressive behavior because it doesn't stop from that side. So obviously that means there's so much more work for me to do, but are there a few simple tips? What can I do to not let the rubber band slip, break?
Right. So, I mean, so there are a couple of things. So one is being patient, right? Because it's just, okay, so first of all, it's not about not feeling bad. We're going to feel bad. We're going to feel annoyed, right? We're going to feel resentful, bitter, whatever. And all of those feelings are going to happen. It's just, okay, that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling it. Maybe I need to go for a little walk or something. I'm feeling it. Actually, what's happened, I mean, my mother actually happens to be a really bad procrastinator. And it just drives me just like, oh my gosh. And actually what's really helped is, what's really helped is I now have named the procrastination. I call her Polly. It's like Polly the procrastinator. It's my mom's buddy. And that actually makes me feel like she's not trying to procrastinate to annoy me.
Yeah.
She just has this friend who's always with her. And so that, I mean, that like, that's actually not part of the respect work, but it's just like, it just has helped me personally when you're talking about, because I think family is different, right? When we're talking about family versus in the workplace, because I think in the workplace, we can what's the word? Justify like, well, okay, yes. And there's some things that I have to put up with because I'm getting paid. Right. And so, and yeah, and this is actually, people have asked me, well, forms of respect, this works, applies to my home. And I'm like, it does. And the thing is, we actually we might prioritize different forms of respect with our colleagues versus our family versus our friends.
So true.
And kind of recognizing that this is very dynamic is it can be helpful. And also kind of getting to that like asking questions of like, why does this happen? Right. Why? And and understanding, okay, my mom's procrastination comes from a place of perfection. This anxiety around making the wrong choice, because I've seen her have lots of regret around choices. So, I actually was just talking to a friend today whose brother is just retired from being a CEO, very focused on shareholder profit, right? And then they were disagreeing about something political. And then she realized like his whole career has been about how to ensure returns for shareholders. Of course, that's the way he's going to see this. Oh, it's not because he's selfish. In fact, he's like trying to actually deliver returns to the people who invested in the business. And so what's also kind of beautiful is that even the people who we think we know can still surprise us, because we're also capable of change. Like I mean, if I want people to think that I am capable of change, I have to believe that they're capable of change.
Yes, absolutely. So beautiful. Yet again, I love that, because it's also uplifting and freeing and empowering. And this is exactly what I am about and what I feel we are all here for, to do and to achieve and to create. And I love that you say, it's not about not feeling negative feelings. In fact, we will always feel all the spectrum of all kind of feelings, not at the same time, but but it is about how do we react to those feelings. What do we do with those feelings? And obviously you have beautiful concepts that help us to be more inquisitive about ourselves, and then maybe or hopefully be able to respond to whatever triggered that feeling within us with much more awareness, so that then it's not a conflict that is created as such, but maybe a discussion because there's compassion coming in, or even better, maybe just some form of love for the other person. I mean, that would be the best outcome, obviously.
I think it's also, I just forgot one other thing, because you were asking me how to talk to people about it. And talk to people about it not in a way of like, validate me. It's just like, hey, I am seeing it this way. Do you see it a different way? Is there something I'm missing here? Because I actually had this with a client where I wasn't practicing curiosity. I thought that they were asking me to do something that I didn't want to do. And I got really annoyed. And I even was like, I kind of wrote like it wasn't rude, but it was definitely very crisp about like how I didn't want to do something. And then, but they hadn't actually explicitly asked me to do this thing. I was actually making some assumptions. And then I talked to a friend and I was like, hey, I'm just kind of dealing with a client right now. And I'm really annoyed. And she said, why don't you just ask them what they mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, of course.
I love that.
Just ask questions, practice curiosity. And I went back and I asked, and their request was so reasonable. I was just like, what do you mean by this? It was totally reasonable. But I was already kind of in this mindset of like, oh, they keep saying these little things that I think they're hinting at. They want me to do this and perform this, and I'm not that person. And actually I had made up this whole narrative, and I really needed to talk to someone else. So because I do know this is like, maybe I don't know what to do right now, but talking through it with someone. And this is also then we think about our responsibility on the end when we're listening, because sometimes it's like, oh, this person just wants to validate. And then we can say like, is it okay for me to give you another perspective? And they may say no, like, no, I just want to be comforted right now. I'm like, okay. Okay. And when they're ready, then it could be, oh, well, here's the way I see it. And how do we also make sure that we don't save people? So what I mean by that, in the workplace, sometimes it's like, oh, I had a bad interaction with with a coworker, so I'm going to go talk to another coworker and complain about it. And then that person who's hearing the venting might go, ooh, I need to go save that person. I need to go tell that person you shouldn't say that. And what I could do instead is actually empower that person to go. I mean, this is triangulation, right? Like, how do you make sure that the savior, that you're not trying to save someone, that you're actually empowering someone to have their own, to interact with who they're perceiving as the perpetrator, and not see themselves as the victim.
Totally. So they actually have the opportunity to evolve and grow for themselves. And this is totally something that I learned in one of my first degrees when I, young and, I can save the world and, I want everyone to be happy and healthy. I still want that. I know I can't save anyone or save the world, but what I can do is try with my knowledge and my experience, empower and to lift up. And like you said, ask the right questions, or even sometimes they are not the right questions, but ask
but it's a question.
So that I get to better understand what's truly going on. And then we can see how can we evolve from there. And I think this is so crucial. And throughout the entire interview, I realized how mindful you are of words. And I think this is crucially important. And I do feel often words come out quite harshly, or without that we fully think about the words as such. Obviously we want to make sense of our phrases and we want to be polite in the workspace, but I still think we can be even more mindful of the language, and possibly the language we speak to ourselves, because we've got this internal dialogue going on as well. And I know for my clients and also for myself that this dialogue can often be quite negative, and obviously this then creates more negativity. So maybe also asking those inner questions, if we can catch ourselves. Okay, like let's say I've made a mistake at work, or my boss has reacted in a way I didn't expect, or I'm just not feeling good about something. So having, instead of going, why did I do this? I'm so stupid, whatever your inner monologue is, then with yourself, go like, okay, so what happened? Did I give myself, did I try my best? Which of course we all do. We all try our best. So then first say, okay, yeah, I did. So still not happy with that. So just having this conversation with myself, what happened and how can I evolve from there? Not saying this is easy and that it, you know, takes away the bad aftertaste, but I feel it just, again, makes everything so much more loving and doesn't create this inner war. And I feel this is the place to start, because if we have an inner war and are tight and tension and don't even, you know, then we create this in the outside world as well. So I would love your thoughts about that. And then I would like to go more into leadership, because obviously you are really working with leaders, and I have 2 teenage daughters, and I am often at my limits because they have very fixed mindsets at that age. So one daughter just tells me all the time, I know they won't like me because this is how it is, and I came too late there, and they have all their friendships, and I'm trying to gently, without her going against me, suggesting it hasn't happened yet. Yes, you might have had experiences in the past, but the future doesn't have to be the same. So suggesting there are other possibilities. You won't hear me. So I feel learning more about leadership from you can help me to become even a better leader myself in my home and in my business.
So I'm going to get at the question of the mindfulness, and so I think it's that first the first element of practicing curiosity is asking ourselves questions. And at some point, though, I mean, I think that asking those questions is a way for us to help articulate it for ourselves, so we can then articulate it to someone else. So at some point, we do need to get out of ourselves. This happened to me just the other day. I was with a team member. We were in a team meeting, and they said, we need to make sure we don't do this. And in my mind, I heard this as, you think we're doing it? Right? And so I'm thinking, I'm like, kind of like, she's like, why would you think that? We don't do that. I'm like, we're that like, and I'm running through this. And so then I'm just, okay, how do I phrase this as a question? Right. And so, I mean, I waited until maybe 10, 15 minutes later, because I had to think about it. And then I said, hey, I just want to clarify. Did you bring that up because you think we're doing that right now, that harmful thing right now? Or are you bringing it up because you want to make sure?
Excuse me for interrupting, and this is such a beautiful way to do it. If we can just say, oh, I would just like to clarify. And so it just takes the entire, oh my goodness, she might, you know, criticize me or something out. So I think this is so beautifully, and excuse me that I interrupted you, please continue, but I just think this is so important.
That's it, because, you know, sometimes when we hear someone say, oh, we shouldn't do that, then it's so easy to be like, they think I'm doing it. Right. And it's like, no. And so I said, do you think that we're doing that? Or are you just saying we need to make sure we don't do that? And she said, it's the latter. I'm just saying we need to make sure we don't do that. I'm like, okay. And I was able to then articulate it as a question, because in my mind, the first thing I'm like, how would you possibly think we're doing that? Right? That was my first internal reaction. And so usually this just like, okay, Julie, feel all the feelings. And then how do I make this into a question? Because I actually don't know what this truly is trying to clarify. So yeah, I just had that recently.
And I can so relate to this. I catch myself so often when someone says something, I think like, really? Do they think like I have no integrity? Or I didn't do that myself. So it's so true. And I feel we all have this. So just, then coming up with a beautiful question that doesn't attack or that doesn't feel to the other person it could possibly be an attack, but just, oh, can I clarify? Because I'm not sure. Do you mean this or that? And then the other person has the chance to say what they meant, and then we can go from there. So empowering. I definitely want to bring this more into my life and make sure whenever I have those moments of I ask back. It's beautiful. I love it.
Just taking that pause.
Yes, exactly. Taking that pause. And that is so important. I would also love to hear, have you got tips on how, as adults, we can create beautiful, empowering connections and networks? Because obviously this is one of the factors, one of the huge pillars that keep us healthy, thriving, and glowing. We all know this. We need a beautiful community around us. Doesn't have to be a huge community, yet it's so hard these days, especially as adults, to have a beautiful little crowd around us that we can call friends, that support us, that are there for us. Where do we meet these people? How do we do this? And I feel it's gotten even more difficult with what has happened in the last few years, because we are even more isolated, and many people are still working from home or will continue to do so. So have you got a few tips there?
Yes. Yeah. So I just finished reading The Good Life, Lessons Learned from the World's Longest Study on Happiness. And they talk about how good relationships are key to a good life. And they also talk about radical curiosity being something that's very important to that. And the way they describe radical curiosity is going in, listening deeply and learning deeply. So I'm going to do a tweak on that. And that's that second aspect of that second element of practicing curiosity, which is the relationship building. So again, it's not just about learning about other people. I also have to share myself. Right. And so I can't just learn about other people. That's not sufficient for a good relationship. I also have to share myself. And then the other thing is, I think that a lot of people, so there are studies where kids ask so many more questions than adults. And when I work with teams, a lot of adults say, I'm scared of asking questions. There's a study that showed 70% of individual contributors feel they face barriers asking questions at work. And I think that what happens is the fear of asking questions is we already imagined an answer, right? We imagined how they're going to interpret this. We imagine that they're going to be offended by the question. And what we forget is people have different reactions. Different people have different reactions. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm Asian American. I'm Vietnamese American. A question that offends a lot of Asian Americans is, where are you from? It's like, oh, that's othering. You shouldn't ask that question. That question doesn't bother me. I think it's totally valid to be bothered by that question, right? I'm not saying that people shouldn't have that reaction. I'm saying different people have different reactions. And yet what ends up happening is we're so afraid that whatever we ask is going to offend someone that we don't ask. And even the invitation, if we want to build relationships, we have to take risks. I remember talking to a friend who is very successful. Her first job out of college was a bank teller. And she said that it was really the bank tellers who were immigrants, who had thick accents, who were the best. And she also had a pretty thick accent too. And she's like, and I said, why is that? Because she's like, I learned how to joke, how to rib just enough, how to talk in a way that made it more personal, right? And you had to take risk. And I do believe that, because there are times where, even asking for help, something that people hate to do, that's a risk, because what are we afraid of? We're afraid that they're going to see us as weak. They're going to see us as inferior, whatever that is. And yet studies have shown that when you ask for help, they're more likely to like you. So I think it's actually, there's the story. I don't know if you know the story, the story of Benjamin Franklin, when he asked to borrow a book from someone who doesn't like him, and then they actually have a much better relationship. I don't have a car. I know how to drive, but I don't have a car. So I rely on public transit a lot. I ask people for rides. And I gotta tell you, a lot of times that's when we have these conversations we wouldn't have time for on that ride somewhere. And so that I could see that as, oh, they're going to think that like I'm being moochy or like whatever, right? Like I also see it as like, hey, this is an invitation for us to have a deeper conversation. And we have to take those risks. And I think that people are so afraid of appearing weak, of being rejected, because I also, when I take a risk and someone says no, I have to be okay with that too.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that I shouldn't ask again. And I also think in the spirit of that, like whenever someone asks me for something and I can't do it, the worst thing, something that's worse than saying no or hearing no? Not hearing anything at all.
Yeah.
That's what people are like, not hearing anything at all. Because if we don't, so I always try to give a response like, oh, I can't do it because of this and this. Because at least people don't think, oh, she thinks I'm a loser or whatever, right? It's just, no, here's the reason why I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And you can feel free to ask again if you genuinely do want to help them. And I just hope that by saying this, that your listeners will realize, like, you know what, there is something worse than saying no, and that is not saying anything at all. And if I want to have a good relationship with someone, saying no quickly, if I can't do it, is actually, that will help the relationship.
It's so true. I wish I would try for my girls to listen to this interview, because I feel this is, they are now at that age where they are starting to have crushes and are trying to build their first relationships. And I just feel this is so wise, so helpful, so empowering. Thank you so much, Julie. I could talk forever with you. I know we are already a little bit over our time. Where can my audience find you, and where can they find your amazing book? And I'm asking also for myself, because I definitely order that book right after our chat here. Tell us.
So yes, so you can actually go to Amazon to get my book. You can also go to Barnes & Noble and other stores to get the book as well. So you can get it online. You can find me at curiositybase.com. That's my company website. You can also go to formsofrespect.com, and that is the website for the book and for the framework. There's a free quiz. There's a free short digital course. We actually have lots of free resources, including our YouTube videos where I do lots of tips as well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fantastic. I will put all of this into the show notes. And Julie, honestly, I feel I have to have you back, because I feel we've just scanned just the superficial stuff, and there's so much more to talk about. I have 3 last questions for you. So I would love for you to, you've shared so much wisdom and knowledge, but just 3 really brief gold nuggets for my audience, so that they can remember 3 gold nuggets that will enhance their life.
Okay. So if you want someone to give you grace, you have to be willing to give them grace. And you have to be willing to give yourself grace.
Beautiful.
So I'll just say that. I think those are 3.
Absolutely beautiful. And it sums it all beautifully up. Julie, I am incredibly grateful for the amazing, beautiful, enlightening work that you are doing. You are making our world a healthier, happier place. And I'm honestly grateful for your time and for all the amazing work that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I so enjoyed our conversation. And thank you for all that you do.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care, beautiful. If you love and enjoy my podcast, then please help me. to make our world a healthier, happier place. And you can do so by subscribing to, liking, sharing, and reviewing my podcast. This really helps for others to find the content is in this podcast too. I know that you were born to live your best life and to feel absolutely amazing in your beautiful body, your brilliant mind, and your boundless soul. So what are you still waiting for? Please make sure you do. I'm your biggest cheerleader and I believe in you. Keep glowing. Much love.